Live on national television, Jasmine Crockett revealed a startling link involving Trump, Melania, and foreign contributors, and Karoline was left speechless. The camera had been rolling for exactly 17 minutes. What began as a tightly controlled, well-rehearsed segment on campaign finance reform unfolded just as planned. Firm smiles, polished messaging, and the usual scripted digs between two rising figures from opposite sides of the political aisle. But then Jasmine shifted in her seat. Instead of replying to Karoline's latest criticism about irresponsible spending tied to progressive policies, she adjusted her microphone, glanced at the host, and leaned in slightly. "I find it interesting," Jasmine began, her voice even, but colder than normal, "that we're here discussing campaign finance, yet no one wants to bring up the donor money connected to the Mar-a-Lago gala in 2022, or how a foreign shell company routed $500,000 to that event, with Melania Trump hosting it herself." Silence. Not the kind of lull that makes TV producers panic and hosts rush to fill the air, but the kind of pause that feels real, unscripted, and hits like a punch to the gut even if you're not sure why yet. Karoline blinked. Once, then again. Her mouth opened slightly before closing. "You want to repeat that?" the host asked, his calm, radio-toned voice trying to ease the tension. Jasmine didn't flinch. "I said the funds were traced to a Beijing-linked holding firm called Sable Bay Consulting, the same company whose board members attended that private dinner at Mar-a-Lago. Two of them aren't even U.S. citizens. One is quietly under investigation in Europe for money laundering." The silence now spread beyond the table. In the control room, newsroom, and crew in the back, no one moved. The cameraman, a veteran, known for staying composed, instinctively zoomed in. Karoline leaned forward, her voice sharp. "That's an irresponsible claim." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Is it irresponsible if I have documents signed by a Trump legal aid authorizing the transfer? Or is it just uncomfortable?" There was a pause. A full second of uneasy stillness. Karoline's poise cracked. Her chin dipped. Her eyes scanned the desk, as if hoping to find a paper that could shield her. Her fingers fumbled with the pen she hadn't touched throughout the show. The host cleared his throat. "All right, let's try to stay on topic." "I am on topic," Jasmine interrupted. "This is campaign finance. This is exactly what it looks like when billionaires steer elections through hidden paths. And no one talks about it, because the people involved have too much power." Karoline finally spoke again, but the sharpness in her tone was missing. "That's not confirmed. You're making accusations without evidence." Jasmine didn't miss a beat. "Then maybe your team can explain why Karoline's own press secretary flagged this issue 2 months ago, or why they've been quietly scrubbing tweets that mention that gala." The host attempted to steer the conversation elsewhere, but it was too late. The shift had already happened. Viewers at home stopped focusing on the policy debate. They were watching expressions, reading the tension, noting the change in tone. Within 10 minutes, clips hit Twitter. "Crockett drops bombshell. Leavitt stunned live on air." Hashtags followed. Viewers freeze-framed Karoline's reaction, comparing it to political turning points from the past. It wasn't just about what was said. It was about how authentic it felt. No spin, no scripted comebacks, no aides whispering from behind the scenes, just two people on camera, one holding a truth, the other unable or unwilling to counter it. But the lead up to that moment wasn't just one isolated story. It ran deep. 3 days earlier, Jasmine Crockett was alone in her modest D.C. office long after her team had gone home. Her jacket was draped over the chair, sleeves rolled up, and her eyes hadn't left the folder in front of her for nearly an hour. The man who had handed it over gave no name, just flashed credentials, a clipboard, and a quiet warning. "You didn't get this from me." She didn't ask how he got through security. That question could wait. For now, her attention was locked on something most politicians try hard to avoid: paper. Actual paper. The kind that can't be deleted with a tweet or twisted in a press release. It wasn't just a memo or a questionable financial record. It was a timeline. It mapped out over $2 million in campaign contributions, all routed through obscure LLCs, with no real business history. One came from an antique rug seller based in Nevada. Another from a shuttered juice company in Sarasota that hadn't filed taxes in 7 years. Every one of them had wired funds just days before a private event at Mar-a-Lago, hosted by Melania Trump, and attended by 2 foreign nationals whose names Jasmine recognized from briefing files linked to international intelligence watch lists. What disturbed her most wasn't just the scale, it was how carefully it was done. Too clean. So methodically arranged it looked legal at first glance. Jasmine leaned back, stood up, and walked to the window, staring down at the quiet street. She didn't feel powerful. She felt cornered, as if moving too fast would blow it all up, but waiting too long would mean losing the chance to act altogether. Her phone buzzed. It was Kendra, her chief of staff, still in the building. "I thought you were taking tonight off," Kendra said, though she clearly knew better. "I was," Jasmine replied, eyes drifting back to the folder. "But something came up." A pause followed. Kendra always knew when Jasmine wasn't being entirely open. "Is this about that thing we weren't supposed to get near?" Jasmine didn't answer right away. "I think it's bigger than we thought," she finally said. "And if I'm right, this is going to shake more than a few trees." "You're going public?" Kendra asked. Jasmine hesitated. "I'm on that panel Thursday with Leavitt. I might say something." Kendra let out a breath. "Jazz, if you say this out loud, it'll hit like a hammer. This isn't poking the bear. This is dragging it out into the open. Are you sure that's the move?" But Jasmine already knew where her instincts were leading her. "They don't expect someone like me to speak up on live TV," she said. "I'm tired of that." She ended the call, walked back to her desk, and flipped to a page near the back of the file. A single signature. Not Trump's, not Melania's, but someone close, a name she remembered from headlines 2 years ago, then never saw again. That unsettled her more than the cash or the foreign names. The silence, the way something so bold could stay hidden because no one wanted to be first to speak. She didn't sleep much that night. She didn't rehearse, didn't tell her staff, didn't even ask for a second opinion, knowing if she did, someone might try to stop her. But once those documents landed on her desk, staying silent no longer felt like an option. Thursday morning in Sacramento was bright, calm, and outwardly routine. Inside the studio, though, tension hummed. Not from anything unusual, but from the electric pressure that always follows live broadcasts. It's not something you talk about. You just feel it deep in your gut as soon as you pass the makeup chairs. Jasmine arrived without her usual team. No publicist, no assistant chasing her with notifications. Just her, carrying a black notebook and a coffee she barely touched. Across the green room, Karoline Leavitt sat poised in a sharp cream blazer, earbuds in, nodding along as her comms director briefed her through a wire. Her posture was precise, her smile practiced. She glanced up once as Jasmine entered, no words, just a flicker of acknowledgement, then returned to scrolling on her phone. The host, Barry Klein, had been leading live panels for 2 decades. Nothing caught him off guard anymore. Not the fake pleasantries, not the unexpected fireworks, not even the rehearsed post-show commentary. He greeted both women with the same dry tone he used for everyone. "Ladies, 3 minutes. Same setup. As always, opening remarks back and forth, then closing thoughts. Keep it civil, or at least make it look that way for the audience." He gave a quick wink. Jasmine didn't return the smile. Backstage, an intern was checking audio levels as the floor director made final adjustments. Barry stepped aside to get some powder on his forehead. Karoline was quietly rehearsing a line about Democrats being hypocritical on budget spending. Jasmine sat quietly, eyes locked on the ground, flipping through her notebook slowly and deliberately. No one asked what she was focused on. From the side, the panel producer Claire leaned in. "You're clear on mic, Jasmine. If you're going to hit healthcare, do it early. Karoline's opening strong on that." Jasmine gave a small nod without looking up, but her mind wasn't on healthcare. She was thinking about the photo from the gala tucked at the bottom of her folder. It showed a handshake between a man from Shenzhen and another who had previously served on the Trump campaign finance team. The shot was taken on the back patio at Mar-a-Lago, champagne glasses, polished suits, and the table's golden edges catching the light. No one had ever asked who had paid for that table. A stagehand held up the 1-minute signal. Barry settled into his seat at center stage. Karoline eased into her chair with a smooth smile, just as the cameras warmed up. Jasmine followed, placing her notebook on the table. She didn't open it. Instead, she looked straight into the lens. She wasn't exactly nervous, but she wasn't calm either. Felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing you couldn't back away, but hoping your voice might carry if you spoke loud enough. The director's voice filled their earpieces. We're live in 5, 4, 3, 2, as the intro music faded and graphics lit the screen. It was already in motion. Another live panel. Another round of talking points and on-air back and forths. For most viewers at home, it looked like any other morning. But backstage, no one knew Jasmine had a different goal. Karoline kicked things off with her usual energy. She hit budget issues, criticized border policy, and slipped in a jab about Democrats losing connection with ordinary Americans. Then Barry turned to Jasmine. She gave a brief smile, automatic almost. Karoline, she said casually, you're great at debating spending, unless it involves private money being funneled through political galas. Karoline blinked. The room didn't react right away, but Jasmine could feel the shift. The air changed. She saw glances exchanged among the crew. One of the producers dropped her pen. Barry glanced up from his notes. The live mic stayed hot, and, with the red light on, there was no turning back. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her words carried enough weight on their own. Karoline didn't fall apart visibly. Her expression changed in phases. First, a furrow of confusion in her brows. Then her mouth opened to interject. Nothing came. Then a visible effort to regroup. She turned toward Barry, seeking a lifeline, but none came. Could you clarify that? Barry asked, trying to sound even, though tension cracked through his voice. Absolutely, Jasmine replied. I'm talking about the private fundraising gala at Mar-a-Lago on April 23, 2022. Guest list, 72. Donations processed within 6 days, 49, all under $250,000. None linked to verifiable U.S. businesses. Karoline sat straighter, lips tightening. That's ridiculous, not confirmed by any credible source. Actually, Jasmine interjected, your own party's financial oversight group began a discreet internal inquiry last fall. You might want to check your inbox, or maybe ask your comms director why they sent a memo warning staff to avoid any reference to donations with foreign connections. I've seen it. In the control room, a note was passed to Barry through his earpiece. He sat up, adjusting his tie. We weren't informed about any of these allegations before today's broadcast, he said quickly. Jasmine turned to him. You weren't supposed to be. A quiet settled over the panel like a slow-moving cloud. One of the producers silently mouthed, cut to commercial, but Barry stayed put. He knew the clip was already being recorded on dozens of DVRs, hundreds of screen captures. Cutting away now would only feed the fire. Karoline finally managed to speak. These are unverified, nearly slanderous. You're throwing accusations around like it's theater. Jasmine gave a light shrug. Then take me to court. The silence that followed wasn't the uncomfortable kind. It was the kind of claim that made people lean in. You're suggesting the former president and first lady knowingly took part in illegal campaign finance activities? Karoline asked, her tone tight. I'm not suggesting anything, Jasmine replied. I'm stating facts, ones that are written down, signed, verified, and reviewed by 2 legal experts who both served in your own administration. At that, Barry leaned in. Do you have those documents with you? Jasmine gave her notebook a single tap. I didn't come to flash paperwork. I came because silence comes at a cost, and I'm done pretending money like this just appears. Karoline's face stayed motionless. She had 2 options, deny strongly or change the subject. But she froze. And in that pause, everything shifted. The live stream's comment feed lit up. Is this real? She brought receipts. What's Karoline searching for? Her pride? By the time the segment wrapped, just 2 minutes later, Jasmine had changed the direction of the entire discussion. Barry closed out the panel politely, thanking both guests. But no one was really listening. The feed switched to commercials. But online, it was just beginning. Within minutes, clips exploded across TikTok and X. Hashtags started trending. One image, Karoline with her hand half raised, blinking fast, mouth open but silent, spread rapidly with the caption, "When you realize she came prepared." At the network's main office, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. Producers rushed into emergency meetings. Editors were ordered to prepare evening news packages, some full, some trimmed for time. Legal teams reviewed the footage more than once. Jasmine walked out of the studio without sticking around for the post-show chat. She didn't talk to the reporters waiting outside. She didn't wave at the cameras. She just got into the black sedan waiting at the curb and sat in the back seat, notebook gripped in her lap. Her phone kept buzzing, but she didn't answer. Not yet, and this wasn't just political fallout. The impact spread into personal lives too. Jasmine barely made it home before the second wave hit. By the time she dropped her bag and kicked off her shoes, 3 networks had requested follow-up interviews. Her voicemail was full. Messages poured in, some from journalists she hadn't heard from in years, others from former co-workers she hadn't spoken to in months. But it wasn't only the media. Her mom called twice. Her younger brother texted, "You broke the internet, good luck at Thanksgiving." Even her old college roommate from Tallahassee sent a screenshot of the moment with one word: girl. Jasmine collapsed onto the couch, staring at the TV without really hearing it. Every channel had her image side by side with Karoline's. Every segment asked the same thing. Did Jasmine go too far? Or did she finally say what others wouldn't? Meanwhile, Karoline's office released a statement. It was short and dismissive, calling Jasmine's remarks reckless in an obvious attempt to divert attention from her own track record. But people weren't buying it. What caught viewers wasn't just what was said, but how it unfolded. Jasmine never backed down. Karoline, who always had a quick reply, froze on camera with millions watching. The memes didn't stop. One showed Karoline edited into an empty classroom with the caption, "When you forget the test is today and it's live." Another had Jasmine in sunglasses, walking away from a cartoon-style explosion. Some were silly, some brutal, but all of them agreed. Something significant had just taken place. While social media laughed, argued, and reposted, the people behind the scenes went into crisis mode. At party headquarters in Tallahassee, comms teams held private calls with legal advisors. The finance department dug through months of donor records, trying to figure out how much of Jasmine's claim was valid. A leak? A rogue staffer? A missed foreign link? No one saw it coming. Back at the studio, panic brewed quietly. Claire, the lead panel producer, sat at her desk, rewatching the clip for the 8th time. She didn't even raise her voice. She mumbled. She just dropped it. Barry appeared in her doorway. "Do you think it's legit?" Claire didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. They both knew it didn't matter. The viewers believed it. That was enough. By the next morning, Jasmine's office had received almost 4,000 emails. Half were supportive. Half were angry. All were intense. At 8 a.m., Kendra, her chief of staff, burst into the room carrying coffee, looking alarmed. She didn't bother with greetings. "Okay," she said. "The networks want a response. Do we admit you had the documents or not?" It was vague. Jasmine remained composed. "Let them speculate. If they want evidence, they'll look for it." "You're being called everything from a reckless truth-teller to a party traitor," Kendra noted. "Also, Karoline's team is making calls. They're trying to find out what else you might be holding." "Good," Jasmine replied. "Let them guess," but not everyone was applauding. A senior congressman from Louisiana left a voicemail on her office line, cautioning her to be careful. A prominent lobbyist suggested donors were uneasy with her approach. One of her trusted colleagues even texted, "You could have handled this internally. Why go public like that?" Jasmine's reply was simple. Because internal channels are where truth goes to die. She hadn't slept much, but she didn't feel worn out. She felt sharp. She hadn't revealed that information for attention or fame. She just understood the cost of silence. She'd witnessed it before, at City Hall, in courtrooms, and at community forums where people whispered truths they were too afraid to voice. Now, the truth was out. Whether it stuck or disappeared would depend on what followed. But the real storm was still to come. People started digging. 3 days after the broadcast, a freelance investigative journalist named Hector Padilla sat hunched over a folding table in a small co-working space off Speedway Boulevard in Tucson, Arizona. He hadn't planned to follow this story. But after Jasmine Crockett's clip went viral, something about her calm delivery stayed with him. It wasn't her presence. He didn't care for theatrics. What caught his attention was the consistency. What she said matched a file he'd been building for over a year. It had begun with one donation, a $210,000 wire from a Las Vegas import company that hadn't shipped anything in nearly 10 years. Then another, $195,000 from a car rental business, tied to a vacant lot in Phoenix. Neither company had any prior political activity, yet both had donated the maximum amount allowed to a super PAC tied to the Trump-affiliated Patriot Restoration Coalition. Hector had flagged these before, but editors always declined. No hard proof, they'd said. No smoking gun. That changed when Jasmine mentioned Sable Bay Consulting. He hadn't heard that name in months, but as soon as she said it, something clicked. He went back through his archive. Sure enough, Sable Bay had appeared briefly among documents from a 2022 whistleblower case. The reference was buried, nearly unnoticeable, but it was there, listed as a third-party logistics partner for a high-end shipping firm based in Macau, which made no sense. There were no products, no shipments, just wires, just funds. That same afternoon, Hector phoned an old contact, someone who had worked in risk compliance at a regional bank in Santa Fe. "I need to see transfers between Sable Bay and any political committees between January and June 2022, Hector said. The person on the other end hesitated. "You know I can't just release that." "I'm not asking for account numbers," Hector responded. "Just patterns, some names, a few red flags." The line went silent. An hour later, the contact sent over a single spreadsheet, cleaned of client data, but enough to spark interest. More than a dozen wire transfers, all under the required reporting limits, all sent within a 72-hour window surrounding private events at Mar-a-Lago. One transfer was just hours before a private dinner, reportedly hosted by Melania, for select international contributors. The dates matched Jasmine's timeline, but it didn't end there. Hector discovered a company, Arbison Global Logistics, connected to the same Macau group. The LLC was registered in Delaware, operating out of a mailbox inside a shared office space in He made a few calls. No one there had ever heard of them. The more he searched, the more unusual it became. That same holding group also gave $60,000 to a community development nonprofit in South Dakota, a group with no web presence, no visible projects, and a board made up entirely of former campaign consultants. It was a messy trail, complex, but clearly real. Hector knew he was onto something important. He contacted a small, fearless online news site, the Ledger Wire. They weren't flashy, but they didn't shy away from hard stories. Within 24 hours of Hector sharing the details, the outlet published a piece titled "Foreign Shadows: The Hidden Donor Trail Behind American Campaign Cash." Jasmine was named in the opening paragraph. So was Sable Bay. The article caught fire. Even major outlets that had avoided her claims now had to report it. CNN covered it. Reuters too. The Washington Times ran a more reserved version. Suddenly, Jasmine's comments weren't just going viral. They were gaining credibility. Karoline Leavitt office, however, went silent. No statements, no clarifications, just nothing. But Hector didn't stop. He knew that once the public sensed a scandal, the people behind it didn't vanish. They just adapted. He wanted more evidence, actual voices. So he flew to Miami. He had a lead, a former aide who helped coordinate donor invites at Mar-a-Lago. Word was she felt pushed out and wasn't happy about it. While reporters followed the money trail, something else unfolded behind closed doors. For 4 full days, Karoline Leavitt said nothing. She skipped a fundraiser in Des Moines, canceled a podcast appearance. Even her normally hyperactive social media feeds went dark. No posts, no news, just silence. Inside her Arlington office, the mood was tense. Staff whispered. Phones rang without answers, blinds stayed drawn. No one knew if Karoline was preparing to fight back or just hoping the storm would pass. Then, early Tuesday, she called a staff meeting. 5 senior aides, squeezed into the tight conference room. Karoline entered in a plain gray sweater, hair tied back, no makeup. She stood, didn't sit, holding a folder and a water bottle. "I'm speaking publicly today," she said, not looking up. No denial, no attack, just direct. Her campaign manager, Seth, a sharp, strategic type, pushed back immediately. "If you speak, you validate the accusations. We don't need that. This will blow over." "It's not blowing over," she answered, "and I won't pretend I didn't see what I saw." Another aide chimed in. "You don't have to defend yourself." Jasmine made it personal. "It's all for show." Karoline paused. Maybe, but it worked because it wasn't a show. That moment was honest. She meant it, and I froze because I didn't know what she knew. Seth sighed. "So what? You're going to apologize?" "No," she said quietly. "I'm going to be honest." The press conference was set for 3 p.m. Eastern. No national media outlets were invited, just local reporters and a few independent journalists who had been seeking comment since the segment aired. Karoline stepped up to the podium alone. "I've spent the last few days thinking carefully about what was said last week," she began. "And after going through the documents now circulating, yes, parts of it were new to me." She looked straight into the camera. "I didn't know the full extent of the financial ties linked to that 2022 fundraiser. I wasn't there that night. I didn't help organize it, but I did stand up for something I didn't completely understand. That's my mistake. No spin, no shifting blame, just direct language." A few journalists exchanged looks. Karoline continued. "There are systems that reward silence, that make ignoring easier. I won't pretend I've always stood against that, but I'm ready to now." Within minutes, clips of her statement spread online. It wasn't an apology. It was a shift, one that left people wondering what she actually knew and what else she might reveal. Some of her backers felt let down, but others stood by her. Even her critics acknowledged she'd done something rare, admitted she didn't know everything. Later that night, Jasmine sat in her living room, watching the broadcast. She wasn't smiling, but there was something in her eyes, maybe relief. Kendra, sitting beside her, nudged her arm. "You think she means it?" "I don't know," Jasmine said. "But I think she finally sees this isn't just about political sides. It's about who you are when no one's feeding you lines." Karoline didn't hold more press events. She didn't chase cameras. She let her words sit, and people noticed. Her poll numbers dipped, then steadied. Some party loyalists distanced themselves. But new audiences, independents, first-time voters, even some moderate critics started to engage again, not because they fully agreed, but because they saw something real in her pause. Because sometimes the most powerful thing someone can admit is that they didn't know. But Jasmine knew. The truth wasn't done shaking things up. The story didn't disappear. It shifted. A month after the broadcast, Jasmine Crockett was invited to speak at a Fresno, California town hall. It wasn't on TV. No press frenzy. Just metal chairs, low ceilings, and a group of about 60 people. Teachers, drivers, retirees, and students. She didn't bring slides or a rehearsed pitch. She stood behind a scratched wooden podium and told the story plainly, because usually truth doesn't arrive with fanfare. She described how it appears, tucked in a manila folder, handed off in a hallway by someone with weary eyes and a hushed warning. And when it does, you're not always sure what to do with it. All you know is that if you sit with it too long, it starts to burn. She spoke about the silence in rooms where people should ask questions, but don't. About emails that are ignored because no one wants to be the first to admit there's a problem. About how the system, no matter the party, was designed to keep things quiet and running. People listened. No one looked away, because this wasn't about party politics anymore. It was about integrity. Jasmine never portrayed herself as a savior. She didn't act like she had uncovered a massive cover-up. What she revealed wasn't a single scandal. It was a trend. One that had been normalized, even rewarded, and hidden behind polite gestures and overlooked concerns. After her speech, an older woman approached her. Her voice was gentle, worn by time. My husband used to say the toughest truth to live with is the one you didn't speak when you had the chance. Jasmine nodded. She understood exactly what that meant. Meanwhile, across the country, Hector, Padilla's investigation kept gaining traction. A second report traced more donor ties, this time through a little-known nonprofit in Utah. It had rerouted funds using consulting fees connected to that same 2022 Mar-a-Lago event. 2 resignations followed. Quiet, no press coverage. But Jasmine took note, and Karoline. She never addressed the fundraiser again. But her voting habits changed. She stopped backing bills that reduced financial oversight for political contributions. She supported an amendment to strengthen FEC enforcement, small changes, but Jasmine noticed, because sometimes accountability doesn't shout. It arrives quietly and begins rearranging things. People began to ask more questions at fundraisers. Campaign staffers became more careful about where money came from. A few campaigns even returned sketchy donations. It wasn't a dramatic shift, but it was movement, because the real strength of truth isn't always in the explosion. It's in what lingers afterward. Back at her D.C. office, Jasmine looked at the now worn folder that started it all. She hadn't tossed it, and she hadn't displayed it either. It rested on a shelf wedged between a copy of the Federalist Papers and an old photo of her and her sister on a swing set in a Dallas park. One afternoon, Kendra walked in holding a stack of mail. "Anything good?" Jasmine asked. "Couple letters," Kendra replied, handing over a yellow envelope. "Mostly from people you rattled." Jasmine gave a slight smile. "Then I did something right." Inside the envelope was a handwritten note. "You said what I couldn't. You reminded us that silence isn't neutral, it protects the wrong people. Thank you, no signature, no return address, just a reminder that once truth is spoken, it doesn't vanish. It echoes. It shifts things, it stays. So what's the lesson? It's this: if you're holding on to the truth, waiting for a perfect time, it may never come. Say it anyway. The price of silence is always heavier than the weight of truth. Because silence might safeguard your status, but it won't protect your conscience. And if you ever find yourself at a table where no one's willing to call out the obvious, be the one who does. If this story meant something to you, if it gave you pause, share it. Talk about it. Don't let silence win, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories that say what most won't.